As part of the Clear-Sighted Career Online Learning Series, we welcome you to this webinar titled Top Tips for Exceptional Cover Letters. My name is Sharon Kane, and I serve as the Director of Professional and Academic Programs in Notre Dame's Alumni Association. We all understand that in order to grab a recruiter or hiring manager's attention or make a first impression, we have a matter of seconds. And the cover letter is a key document, and it's often sub-optimized. In this webinar, with the help of our expert, Annie Duffy, we will specify the components of an exceptional cover letter. We're going to share expert tips on the tone, focus, and content of cover letters, and reveal what should be included and what can be excluded from a cover letter. Part of our message today is that cover letters should not be an afterthought. You want to maximize your opportunity to make it memorable. I'm pleased to welcome today's presenter, Annie Duffy. Annie serves as the Alumni Association's career advisor and provides one-on-one advising services to our alumni. She is a certified professional resume writer and regularly provides instruction and feedback on cover letters and resumes so that our alumni distinguish themselves in the marketplace. Annie is herself a 2006 Notre Dame graduate, earned a degree in marketing from the Mendoza College of Business. She worked in Notre Dame's Alumni Association directing the clubs for 3+ years before transitioning and assuming her current role. Annie created today's presentation based on her interactions with our alumni as well as proven practices. Welcome, Annie, and thank you for leading us through the Top Tips for Exceptional Cover Letters webinar.
Hello, thank you, Sharon, for the introduction, and thank you, viewers, for taking the time to watch this installment of the Clear-Sighted Career Online Learning Series, as Sharon mentioned, focusing on creating an exceptional cover letter. We'll take time today to go through the basics of building a solid cover letter, as well as recommendations to make yours stand out from the competition. As Sharon also mentioned, all of the feedback and advice provided is based on my experience reviewing cover letters over the years, as well as common mistakes and misconceptions that I most often see. Before we begin, we'd also like to encourage you to later take a look at the articles and books section of our Career Services website, also within the Multimedia Resources segment, as these will offer some outstanding supplemental ideas and recommendations. Today we'll begin by talking about each of the components of a cover letter from top to bottom and what not to forget in each section. And we'll follow with a discussion on the overall tone and focus of a cover letter so that you can best capture the reader's attention and set your cover letter apart from all others. We'll then talk about the specific content of the cover letter, followed by additional recommendations on what to exclude as well as what to always include. And then we'll conclude with a few final tips and reminders to always keep top of mind when writing a cover letter. We'll begin today's discussion by talking about the components of a cover letter, starting from the very top of the page and making our way down to the bottom. First, I always recommend to alums to start your cover letter off using the exact same heading as in your resume. This will allow for consistency across documents, which is ideal considering the reader probably has a large number of resumes and cover letters sitting in front of them. This will allow them to easily find both of your documents quickly when sifting through their pile. And it also allows them to get an idea of your personal brand. From here, you'll always want to follow a business formal format. I know this sounds simple enough, but you'd be surprised by how many cover letters come across my desk that aren't in a business formal format or only portions of one. Since this is a professional document, it's imperative to always stick to business formal, even if you're submitting electronically. There are a few variations of business formal formats out there, and many can be found through a simple Google search. The first piece of a business formal format in a cover letter should be your date. Again, I know this sounds straightforward, but I see so many people who forget to include this or who forget to update it. The next section is the inside address. This should always be included, and it should always include the name and title of the individual you're sending this to. The inside address is then followed by the greeting. Similarly to the inside address, you'll always want to include a name here. Really try your best to find out who this letter will be read by. It goes a long way to the reader if their name is listed in the salutation and address versus the generic "Dear Recruiter" or "To whom it may concern." I know it's not always possible to get a name, but if you can find it online or even by calling the company's front office, it really will go a long way. Many times the front office is okay giving this information out if you explain you're using it to address your cover letter. Another reminder when writing out your greeting, in a business formal format, you should always end your greeting with a colon versus a comma. Again, this is an error I see very often that you'll just want to avoid. We then go into the body of the letter, which we'll discuss in more detail a little later on in the presentation, since this is the bulk of the letter and of the highest importance. And then the letter concludes with your closing, which is simply anything from sincerely or regards, and then your full name. So those are the components of your cover letter. Remember, follow a business formal format, and putting these components together will be no problem at all for you. Next, we're going to talk about the tone and focus of your cover letter. First, and probably most obviously at this point, is that the tone should be professional. Even if you know the hiring manager, or even if you're submitting this internally and you know the dynamics of the team are laid back, always err on the side of overly professional. You never know whose hands this might end up in. It could be the CEO's. You want to provide the best impression of yourself possible all the time. Keep the letter clear and easy to read. Keep it simple. Avoid buzzwords and just making it too wordy in general. And be sincere. Let the reader know who you are. Remember, recruiters and HR managers are people too. They want to learn about you as a person here. So avoid writing out so much business jargon that it sounds like a machine wrote your letter. Try and make it authentic. And next, one of the most important pieces of feedback I've learned in my time studying and reviewing cover letters is that it's a great idea to really make this document employer-focused versus job seeker-focused. This is something job seekers rarely do, and I absolutely believe that doing so will really make your cover letter stand out from others. Similarly to your resume, you'll want to tie your experiences back to what the reader is asking for in their job description. But even more so here than in the resume, use your words to express how you can help them. So many individuals use the cover letter as a place to let the reader know why they want this job and why they want to work at this company, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but at the moment, that's not the employer's top concern. And I don't mean to sound harsh. They will care about your wants and needs, but likely only after they've brought you on. Until then, what will be much more impactful to the reader is when the job seeker can clearly express how their qualifications can solve the employer's immediate problem, which is to successfully fill the open position. You can do this primarily by going back to that job description, taking out those keywords and phrases, and incorporating them directly into your cover letter along with your related experience. But another great way to do this is to decrease the number of personal pronouns used. Now, unlike the resume, you're going to have to use personal pronouns at least a little bit in your cover letter. However, really work hard to shift the focus from I to you. At the very least, really strive to avoid beginning paragraphs and even sentences when possible with I or my. Below I've listed an example of an opening paragraph that's employer-focused, as well as a common opening statement from a cover letter that's more job seeker-focused. Feel free to pause the presentation and take a minute to read each of them. Once you've finished, you'll notice that the first avoids beginning the paragraph with I and almost immediately goes into how the job seeker's experience can help the company, whereas the second focuses on the wants and desires of the job seeker, not at all alluding to how their experience can support the organization. All right, and next we're transitioning into what's likely the most important part of your cover letter, its content. If you've reviewed our resume webinar, you'll already know I'm a huge proponent of the less is more concept. As I stated there, HR and hiring managers spend only 20 to 30 seconds max reviewing a resume, and even less than that reading your cover letter. This said, keep it short and sweet so that the chances of them reading all of the letter are greater. Your cover letter should really strive to be just 3 paragraphs long with 5 to 6 lines per paragraph max. Do not list your entire work history. The reader has potentially hundreds of letters and resumes to read, so they don't have a lot of time. List only what they want and need to see based on the job description that they've provided you. Listing anything else is an almost guaranteed way to get your resume placed in the no pile, as they're likely not going to read it all, let alone get to that relevant information. As you know, the space on your resume is very limited. You have only 1, maybe 2 pages depending on your professional history. So, use the cover letter as a place to introduce new information that you couldn't fit on your resume. The cover letter is the perfect place to include supplemental, relevant information that didn't fit due to space limitations. Or, you can use your cover letter as a place to expand upon information listed in your resume. Again, you have a very limited amount of space on that resume, and it's likely you won't be able to go into the details of your experiences and accomplishments. That said, take advantage of the cover letter resume package. If those additional details are relevant to the reader, this is the perfect place to list them. Just make sure you never regurgitate what's written on your resume. Simply repeating information already listed is a pet peeve of hiring managers. We want to be respectful of their limited time, so trust they'll read it the first time. When you're writing out your content, take advantage of the fact that you aren't required to list dates in your cover letter. So, if you have extremely relevant information from 10 years back, and it's either not listed on your resume or it's towards the bottom, feel free to offer those details right here. The reader only needs to see the information in your letter, not necessarily the corresponding dates. You may need to be prepared to discuss further in the interview, but for the time being, focus on providing them just what they need to know to capture their attention. And don't be afraid to use bullets in the body of your letter. This is a great way to organize your content and highlight key skill sets. Eyes are drawn towards bullets because they're easy to spot and easy to read. It's one of my favorite ways to lay out a cover letter. In addition to being easy to read, bullets provide an added bonus of allowing you to be more concise, since you don't necessarily have to use full sentences. Rather, you can write them out in note form. There are many options to laying out content in a bullet, but one great way to start is to start with a keyword or skill set in bold and then follow with the corresponding relevant information written out in note form. And to wrap up with content, I wanted to briefly go through each section of the cover letter, discussing what information goes where and in what level of detail. We obviously want our opening paragraph to be strong, since this is the first piece they're going to read, and it will either encourage or discourage them from continuing. However, we also want to keep it short since we have such a limited amount of time. This said, use the opening paragraph sort of as an opening summary, providing your reader a high-level idea of the details to come. Introduce your high-level, relevant experience and offer as many hard skills as you can. For example, number of years of experience or specific industry background. Then prep them for what's next. Of course, always tying back to exactly what they're looking for. This following example continues from the introductory paragraph we started earlier, and not only immediately tells the reader that they can help them, but also provides those hard skills and offers a great segue into the next section, which is really the body of the letter. Here, you'll list specific details of your background and how they're directly relevant to the job you're applying for. You'll want to let the reader know exactly how you can help them, taking it a few steps further than your opening paragraph. Let them know the value you can bring to the company and that you can solve their problem. And finally, make sure you're tailoring each letter you write directly back to the job description. By using the job description to craft your letter, again, pulling out those keywords and letting the reader know you have those exact skill sets, you're automatically letting them know you're the perfect fit. And finally, you'll finish off with a quick closing paragraph of 2 to 3, maybe 4 sentences. Use the space to wrap up what you've noted above, and then offer a meeting or interview. I stress offer because there's a fine line between being respectfully assertive and overly confident. We never want to be passive, but we also want to remember that the decisions are made by the reader. And stating something like, I will be at your office at 3:30 p.m. on Tuesday, December 1st for an interview is not quite as soft and respectful as something like, your schedule permitting, I'm available to meet the week of November 30th to further discuss my qualifications. Or if you're flexible, you don't need to list available dates at all. You can certainly just state something like, I look forward to hearing from you soon and would be delighted to interview with you and your team at your convenience. And then lastly, always remember to thank the reader for their time and consideration. And before we finish up today, I wanted to go over a few items you'll always want to avoid noting, as well as a handful that are important to include. First, you'll always want to exclude anything negative. I see so many cover letters that address why the individual is missing certain experience or even apologizing for not having certain qualifications. Please avoid this. There's no reason to utilize the little space that you have on anything other than highlighting the skills you can bring to the table. For example, if you're transitioning from sales to elementary education, there's no need to tell the reader, although my experience in the education sector is limited, no. Focus on just your transferable skills and keep it positive. You only want them to see what you can bring, not what you're lacking. You can also toss out any obvious statements like, I'm interested in applying for the position of XYZ associate. Statements like this are just wasting space. The reader knows you're interested in applying for the position since they're reading your cover letter and resume. Utilize this space for that relevant information they want and need to see. It's also not really required to note enclosure resume at the bottom of your cover letter, especially if you're submitting electronically. Similarly to above, this is somewhat of an obvious statement because the reader is going to assume you're already submitting your resume if you're providing with your cover letter as part of the application. If you're submitting this as a hard copy via snail mail, or if you're sending via email outside of a formal application process, you could include this note, but again, it's certainly not required, and if you don't have the space, you should exclude it. And next, unless you're a very recent grad with little to no professional work experience, it's a good idea to leave off your educational information. Once you hit a year, maybe 2 after graduation, the reader is going to be much more interested in your professional work experience. So save the educational information for your resume, and even then, it should really just be a note stating the institution name, graduation year, degree, and major. And finally, as we spoke about earlier, avoid those me statements. Unfortunately, knowing this is your dream job isn't going to make the reader any more likely to choose you over the next candidate. What's going to make them choose you is their ability to easily see right there on the paper that you have exactly what they're looking for. As for items that you'll always want to include, don't be afraid to answer those glaring questions that might come up as a result of reading your resume. For example, if you're an experienced ER nurse who's looking to transition to IT, or if you live in South Dakota and you're applying to jobs in Japan, the reason why you're looking to make this change is probably worth noting in your letter, since these are such big changes. If you're ever worried the reader is going to question something, consider addressing it head-on. That way, they know you're not hiding anything. Also, feel free to include links to anything that will be of additional interest to the reader. If you have an e-portfolio, a personal website, or even a LinkedIn profile that includes supplemental information that you believe will help in the decision-making process, make note of it in your cover letter. It's a great way to offer more additional information, but not take up a huge amount of extra space. Just make sure the URLs are friendly, since the reader will likely have your letter printed out, and therefore they'll be hard key entering the links in if they decide to take a look. I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but I can't say it enough. Please only include that relevant information. Anything else is just going to vary what the reader needs and wants to see. As I stated in the resume webinar, if it doesn't lead the reader to say, wow, this is exactly what we're looking for, let's bring Jessica in for an interview, then consider leaving it off. Feel free to get creative. Remember what I said earlier, the reader is a person too. Tell them a story and let them know who you are through the computer screen or through that page. Always remain professional, but let yourself come through. And finally, if there's anything that the organization is requiring you to inform them of, such as availability or salary conditions, make sure you note that here if you haven't done so in your resume. And finally, to summarize our presentation today, I wanted to share with you some important tips or reminders to always keep top of mind when drafting your cover letter. Remember to always use a business formal format. Feel free to Google options and use whichever version you'd like. Remember to always keep the cover letter employer-focused versus job seeker-focused. Let the reader know that you can solve their problem, which is to successfully fill the open position. Be concise and tailor the letter specifically to the job you're applying for. The quicker you can get to the point, the more likely the HR manager is to read the entire thing. Make an effort to find out exactly who this letter is being sent to and address it accordingly. Remember, making it personal goes a long way. Don't overthink it. I know how hard this is, but really try your best not to do this. Remember, it's a person on the other end. Be yourself, tell them what they need to know, and keep it simple. Triple, even quadruple check your work. And have a friend do so as well. I know this sounds obvious, but I really do see so many cover letters and resumes with grammatical and spelling errors. These are easy things to avoid. But after you've looked at the document for hours and hours, day in and day out, it's sometimes very easy to miss these things. Take a break, set it aside, and reread it again later with a fresh set of eyes, and then have someone else do the same too. And finally, please feel free to browse related articles on our website, as well as our other webinars under the Multimedia Resources section within the Articles and Books and Webinars and Presentations tab. And now I will turn it back over to Sharon.
Thank you, Annie. So here are a few questions that come to mind to build on the information that you've shared. You've made the important point that cover letters must be customized, tailored to the company and the position, and it seems that the cover letter provides a key opportunity to make explicit what an individual can do for the organization. So the question is, how do we best connect those dots between the individual and the company and or role?
Yes, so to connect the dots, I think the best idea really is to just keep going back to that position description. They are showing you exactly what they're looking for. So take a look, study that position description, and find the skill sets that they need. And then don't just note them in your cover letter, but take it a step further and give specific examples of those skill sets and how your experience exemplifies them. Explain to them right there doing that you are the perfect fit. And then you'll pretty easily be connecting the dots very obviously for them.
Wonderful. So by pulling out from the position description those skills, perhaps some keywords, and I would say about it's important to drive it around to the value, right? How your skills, your experience prove your would-be value to the organization. Do you agree?
Absolutely, yes. So if you can clearly express to them how you can bring value, how you can bring them to the next level, that you can make them more successful, that's going to be a surefire way to get you an interview.
Great. So another question. Many experts describe the resume and the cover letter as two sides to the same coin. And I think that many view them as two independent documents. So with this notion of two sides to the same coin, can't the cover letter be used to answer, as you said, obvious questions, also focus on relevant experiences, and offer quick explanations for anything that might be confusing about your resume or your application?
Yes. So absolutely, it should intend to all of these things. So even though the cover letter should be short, it really will be all-encompassing. It's part of the resume cover letter package, but it also provides that supplemental information too, as part of the package. So I know so many people loathe seeing that note on an application that says upload cover letter here, because it is an extra step in the process and you have to create one. But I really encourage you to take advantage of it and be happy that they're asking you for that, because you can utilize it to go into each of those things that Sharon, you just mentioned, that you can't talk about anywhere else, that you don't have room to. It's a really great opportunity to expand upon all of that.
Right. So if you're experiencing a career transition, if you're desiring to make an industry change, perhaps you've had gaps in your employment or you're re-entering the workforce, this cover letter can be a positive and constructive way to communicate those things to a hiring manager or recruiter, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Great. So if we follow your advice to tell our story in the cover letter, and stories are necessarily personal, how do we make sure that we keep it professional and clear and on topic?
Yes, that's a great question. My best advice to do this, I really believe, is to just keep it short and simple. Feel free to let yourself shine through. You should, but that doesn't mean you need to tell your life story. For example, if you're applying to a job as a scientist, you can absolutely and certainly mention how maybe your love for science stemmed from winning your first science fair in 3rd grade. But avoid going into how after the science fair you went to lunch with your best friend, you went home and played with your childhood dog, or you watched your favorite movie. The reader doesn't need to know this information. Keep it relevant. Stick to the point. And I think really the best way to do this is to just keep it short and simple so that there really isn't even an opportunity to digress.
Thank you, Annie, for giving us the benefit of your experience in reviewing, critiquing, and providing feedback on cover letters through this webinar. Appreciate it very much.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for taking a look at this webinar today. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to email us at career@alumni.nd.edu. And we hope that you have enjoyed this installment of the Clear-Sighted Career Online Learning Series. Thank you and have a great day.